Ensign K. Reyes had been at NAS Coldwater for 6 days, and she had already learned which seats to take in the simulator bay and which ones to avoid. The back left console, wedged between the cooling rack and the emergency exit, was where the sim techs stashed their coffee thermoses, and where the overhead fluorescent closest to the blast wall ran a half-second behind the others. It was also the quietest corner in the room. On her first morning she had claimed it almost by accident, and by the third day she had understood why it suited her. From the back left console, you could watch everything. She was watching now. The woman running diagnostics on Bay 3 was not someone Reyes had been introduced to. She had been there when Reyes arrived at 0620, already seated at the main interface panel, with a contractor ID clipped to a gray fleece vest, a thermos at her left elbow, and a grease pencil making marks in the margin of a printed diagnostic sheet. She was maybe 32. She had dark hair pulled back in a low knot, and she worked with the kind of economy that Reyes had only seen in the senior petty officers aboard her last ship. No wasted motion, nothing for show. She had not looked up when the first group of strike pilots filed in at 0645. She had not looked up when Captain's mast was called to order in the adjacent room, and the voices from that room filtered briefly through the wall. She had made her marks, run her numbers, and worked. Reyes had been watching her for 20 minutes when Lieutenant Commander Aaron Voss walked through the bay door. Voss was the flight ops officer for the Coldwater Strike Wing, and he carried that fact the way some men carry their rank, not on the collar where it was supposed to sit, but out in front of them, clearing the room ahead of them as they moved. He was 40, with short-cropped hair going silver at the temples, and he stopped inside the door and scanned the room once the way a man does when he's looking for something he expects to find wrong. He found it. Contractor. His voice was even, pointed. What terminal are you logged into? The woman at Bay 3 lifted her head. Bay 3 primary. Diagnostic access, read-only. It's in the access log. This bay is restricted to rated aviators during pre-flight operations. Voss walked toward her. Behind him, the conversation among the 14 strike pilots in the room's center cluster died out in pieces. First the men closest to his path, then the ones who noticed the silence and turned. I need to see your clearance level, and your work order. She produced the work order from the clipboard at her left. Voss took it without looking at her. Read it, handed it back. This authorizes you for system maintenance access in Bay 1 and Bay 2, not Bay 3. He held out his hand. Badge. Reyes felt something shift in the room. Not loudly, just a small, collective intake of breath from the pilots nearest to Voss. The woman at Bay 3 did not argue. She unclipped the badge from her vest and set it in his open hand. The badge was white with a blue stripe. Contractor General Access. She picked up her clipboard and began to close down the diagnostic screens one at a time, with the same quiet efficiency she'd used to open them. Gear out, please, Voss said. This terminal is for rated aviators. She unhooked the grease pencil from the clipboard, capped it, set it in her left vest pocket, picked up the thermos. Bay 3 should be good to run, she said. Not to him. To the room. Her voice was the same temperature it had been at 0620, low, level, entirely without strain. The targeting feed was dropping 2 frames on the crossover loop. It's corrected. You'll want to run a verification pass before the first pilot loads in. Voss said nothing. He turned his body a few degrees toward the door, making the direction clear. She walked across the bay toward the exit, past Voss, past the cluster of 14 pilots who had stopped talking entirely. She did not look at any of them, not from defiance, not from hurt. The way Reyes read it, from the back left console, she simply didn't need to. Whatever she was thinking behind those steady eyes, she had already accounted for it. She was 3 steps from the door when the terminal at Bay 3 made a sound. Not an alarm. Something more specific, a 2-tone access prompt that Reyes had heard only once before, during her first sim orientation, when the system's Master Chief had been demonstrating the clearance tiers. The tone that indicated a Tier 1 classification event on the primary interface. Voss turned. Bay 3's main screen had changed. The diagnostic interface was closed. In its place was a login confirmation screen, and then, 3 seconds later, a secondary panel that Reyes had never seen before. Dark background, white text. The word locked in amber block letters across the top, and below it, a clearance designation she recognized by its prefix and not by its specific content, because the specific content sat above her grade, and below that, in the field marked Terminal Administrator Override Access. Denied. Voss took 2 steps toward the terminal. He pressed his badge to the reader. The screen did not change. He pressed it again. Denied. He pressed his own access code into the keypad. The code that, as flight ops officer, should have cleared any lock in the room. The amber text held. The woman had stopped just short of the door. She had not turned around. Chief Parrish, one of the pilots said quietly. The system's master chief, a heavy-set man in his late 40s, crossed from the equipment rack and looked at the Bay 3 screen for a long moment. His face did not change. He looked at Voss, then at the woman near the door, then back at Voss. "Commander," he said, "that's a Tier 1 access event. I can't override it from here. That requires the wing CO." Voss stood very still. The room was entirely quiet. The door at the far end of the bay opened. Captain Dale Hargrove, commanding officer of the Coldwater Strike Wing, was a man Reyes had seen twice in her 6 days on base. Once at a morning brief, and once crossing the flight line in a direction that made it clear he was going somewhere with purpose. He moved that way now. Behind him, a Lieutenant Commander Reyes didn't recognize was carrying a gray folder. Hargrove read the Bay 3 screen. He did not appear surprised by what he saw. He turned to look at the woman near the door, and something happened in his face that Reyes didn't have a word for yet. Not recognition exactly, something more careful than that, something that looked like respect arriving in the place where it should have been all along. "Ma'am," he said, "would you stay, please?" She turned around. Hargrove nodded once to the lieutenant commander with the folder. The man opened it, produced a tablet, and pressed play on an audio file. A burst of static, then a voice, her voice, unmistakably, though flatter and faster under pressure than the quiet version Reyes had been listening to all morning. Coldwater, Coastline, 4-ship element, Angels 12, Squirter Northwest, 3 nautical. Crew 2 Alpha is down in the valley. I have eyes. Request CAS package, immediate. I'm going to talk you in. A pause on the recording. Radio noise, then a controller's voice reading back coordinates. Solid copy. Coastline, you are cleared hot. 2 Alpha. Coastline is your lead. Trust her. Then her voice again, clean and controlled, calling headings and distances through a situation that Reyes could track well enough from context. A 4-ship element, enemy movement, 3 downed air crews in the valley, close air support being called by a single pilot, coordinating the entire package from altitude. The recording ran for 4 minutes and 22 seconds. Reyes counted, because she needed something to do with her hands. When it ended, Hargrove's flag lieutenant closed the file. 2019, Hargrove said to the room, not loudly. Classified advisory deployment. Coastal Operations Group, Detachment 3. 4 aircraft down in a 2-mile radius. She coordinated the CAS package that pulled all 3 crews. Package completed under direct surface fire. 0 mission failures. 143 confirmed strike packages over 2 deployments. He paused. Youngest woman to qualify in the Navy's Strike Weapons Integration Program. He looked at Voss. Tier 1 access, Commander. That's what you tried to override. Voss had not moved. He was holding her contractor badge, still in his hand, where he'd been holding it since he'd asked for it. He looked down at it now, as if he'd forgotten it was there. Hargrove's flag lieutenant was reading from the folder now, and Reyes heard the words, Strike Weapons Integration Commendation, and Meritorious Performance, and Personal Gallantry, and Call Sign Coastline, and then he stopped, because Hargrove had raised one hand. The wing commander reached into the left breast pocket of his flight suit. He produced a patch, the Strike Walkway Qualification Patch, the one all 14 pilots in the room wore on their left shoulder. He walked across the bay to where she was standing, and he stopped in front of her. Lieutenant Commander Calloway, he said. The name was in the file. He was using it on purpose. I'm sorry it took this long. He pressed the patch to the front of her contractor vest. It didn't have a backing that could hold it. He simply held it there for a moment with his hand flat against it, the way you'd hold a hand on a shoulder. Then he stepped back and stood at attention. Behind him, the 14 strike pilots rose from their seats. Not together, not on any order, each one a moment behind the last, standing up the way people stand when they suddenly understand what they're looking at, and their body makes the decision before their mind does. Chairs scraped, someone's coffee cup went over, and no one looked at it. They stood in a rough line in the center of the bay, all 14 of them, facing her. Reyes stood too. She didn't remember deciding to. She was just standing. Lieutenant Commander Voss stood last. His face had the color of a man who is very aware of what he is holding in his hand. He set her contractor badge on the nearest console, carefully, without making a sound, and he stood. She looked at the room. Her expression had not changed from the moment Voss had asked for her badge to now. The same quiet, the same steadiness. The only difference Reyes could see, from the back left console, was something very small around her eyes. Not tears, nothing like that, just the particular stillness of a person who has carried something for a long time and is finally, in this moment, allowed to set it down. Bay 3 is good to run, she said again. Verification pass first. Hargrove nodded. Yes, ma'am. She picked up her grease pencil from her vest pocket, uncapped it, and made the last mark on the diagnostic sheet. She tore the sheet off the clipboard and set it on the Bay 3 console where the Simtex would find it. She recapped the pen. Then she picked up her thermos, thanked no one in particular, and walked out. The room stayed standing until the door closed behind her. Rhea sat down slowly. She looked at Bay 3's screen, which had returned to its standard interface the moment the door shut. The amber lock gone, the denied field blank, as if it had never been there. She looked at the diagnostic note on the console. She looked at Voss, who had not moved. She thought about what it meant to be in a room with someone for 20 minutes and not know what you were looking at. She thought about the thermos and the grease pencil and the 2-frame lag in the targeting feed that nobody had caught before she did. She thought about the voice on that recording, the same voice, the same temperature, talking a 4-aircraft rescue through direct fire in a valley 9,000 miles away. She reached for her own coffee. Her hand was not entirely steady. Chief Parrish appeared at her elbow. He had a look on his face that old petty officers sometimes get when they have seen something that confirms what they already knew about the world. First week, he said. It was not a question. Yes, Chief. He nodded once, the way men nod when the answer is what they expected. He picked up the diagnostic sheet from the Bay 3 console and looked at it. He set it back down. Pay attention in this room, he said. He walked back to the equipment rack. The bay resumed around her in pieces. Voices coming back, chairs resettling, the hum of the systems cycling up under the fluorescence. 14 pilots who had just stood without an order for a woman they had never been introduced to. A wing commander who had said, "I'm sorry it took this long," and meant it with his whole chest. Reyes opened her sim rotation log and wrote a name at the top of the page. Not because she needed it for the log. She didn't. She wrote it because it was the right thing to do with a name like that. You wrote it down. You made sure it was somewhere. Coastline. She closed the log, straightened it on the console, and turned to watch the first pilot load into Bay 3.